It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back into another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, covering off the latest in property news every morning. Not so much doing that at the moment because we are reflecting back with our look over the 2025 year. We are up to a Wednesday. It is New Year's Eve, the 31st of December. If you're going to be having a big night tonight, do this one thing. Look after a mate. If you are out in the city and you are drinking, look after that friend, because if we all look after just one person, that is one person that potentially won't find themselves in trouble. And no drinking and driving. I say it all the time, it is the worst time of the year to be getting into a motor vehicle. So go safe, go well, enjoy yourself, enjoy your friends and family, but do look after that mate of yours. Coming up in just a moment, we are back into the summer series of real estate. That is up next.
The Real Estate Podcast wishes you and your family a fantastic Christmas break and a happy new year ahead. You're listening to the Summer Series on the Real Estate Podcast.
The damage wasn't as substantial as what we were preparing for. I feel like personal homes, as well as obviously as professionals looking after investment homes, we were very much doing the most, expecting the worst. The 2022 floods, I was a property manager on the ground at that time, and the pressure is quite substantial because you want to ensure that your owners feel, or your landlords feel, very, very safe and secure with you managing their home and overlooking it, and so on and so forth. I would say different areas, some of our Gold Coast offices did have homes with ceiling collapses, and then we had homes in South Brisbane that had obviously roof leaks. We've got a lot of fences down across properties and so on and so forth as well. But I guess regardless of the impact that it has on it, I feel like as a career property manager, you still do have the pressure that you want your landlords and your investors and your tenants to feel very safe and secure throughout the process, and like you have got a handle on everything, you're overlooking everything. And I feel like during those times, no matter what the impact that came after it was, you're still sitting there whilst it hits, thinking about the properties that you manage. I wonder how the tenants are going. Have they had to call SES, so on and so forth? So I think in the lead up to it, we were expecting the worst, and I feel like we did get best case scenario in some areas, but I don't think the pressure changes.
Yeah, we've talked to a number of property managers over the last few years, and one of the things that probably is missing from the conversations that I can recall is not that many questions about a flood event. I can recall asking, if you are an investor, you've got some properties that you're putting in the hands of a management company, what are the sort of things that you should be asking? And a flood event has never been discussed, at least with us. And it's probably something that people should be aware of, particularly if they're in flood zones. They should be talking to their property managers and saying, give us a little bit of guidance around what are your protocols if we have a flood event.
Yeah, that is a great point. And again, it is in the lead up. We had in our templates that to the tenants, look out at your local council for where your sandbags are. This is the number for SES. If you're experiencing this is our emergency contact. Please reach us on this number, and so on and so forth. So I think it is a great question, and it's a great point that investors could be asking managing agents that they're inquiring with.
If you cut out all of these crap purchases that you're buying, you won't just save for your first home. You'll be well on your way to perhaps buying your second property. Now, it's incredible how much stuff people, Margaret, accumulate over the years. And then when they hit 50, they suddenly have this revelation. Oh, I've decluttered. And it feels amazing. But why wait until then? Start in your 20s. Ditch the junk, focus on what really matters, and set yourself up for a stronger financial future.
Absolutely. And I don't want to be one of those people who continuously points to people buying their smashed avos and having these lifestyles that younger people tend to have that we certainly didn't have, and say, well, we had it right, you've got it wrong. I think the important thing to note here is that young people do have added pressures that we didn't have as young people. We got to live our lives quite privately, and anything that we did was known by our neighbour and maybe our best friend or our small circle of friends, but not the wider community. And young people do live in this wider community, very public lives through social media, where there's a lot of pressure to perform against other people. And therefore, we're constantly seeing people living these, I guess, often fake lives on social media that makes it look like they've got it all under control and they've got this wonderful life. And I think what is really required here is more of an attitude change and a complete blocking of that norm that you think you need to live up to by not looking at social media, by realizing that in your own household budget, there are probably many things that you can go without now. And I can tell you something that I've learned over time, and that is that while I'm young and robust to go without those extras, to go without eating out and getting takeaway, then it is when you get older and you don't have that energy so much anymore. I wouldn't like to be in a poor financial position now that I'm in my 60s, whereas when I was in my 20s and 30s, I coped with it pretty well. Retirement is a long time, particularly now that we're living so much longer. We can expect to be in retirement 30, 40 years. Think about that and put aside today, get ahead today, get into your first home, even if it's something you don't want in an area that you don't really want to live in, that you've got to commute from. Take something that's not as good as your dream for now, because what it will do then, it will allow you to snowball and build so that by the time you do retire, you don't have to worry so much about all of these things that are going on in the world.
Now, I've got a friend, and you probably know people too, that have got multiple properties. He owns over 50 properties. I told him to sell and enjoy life, but he said, I can't do it. I love my property market too much. So when is enough enough? I guess it's a hobby. Matthew Hughes is joining us right now. He loves his property as well, the Managing Director at Capital Property Advisory there in Perth. Good morning to you, Matthew. So what do you reckon? Does it feel like 5 years ago to you?
I think I agree with your sentiment. It certainly doesn't feel like 5 years has passed, in that the recollection of that time is still very vivid in my mind. But it also seems like a long time ago now. So it's a little bit strange in terms of my recollection of it. But I think in WA, we had a much easier journey through COVID than some others. I'm sure some people in Victoria and other states have probably got it still very much fresh in their memory.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the Twilight Zone. Yes, on one hand, a short amount of time, and on the other hand, a lifetime ago. Well, let's focus in on the Perth property market, which, as we know, it's been very steady, upward trend for some time. There's been a lot of gains in your market. Since our last discussion, has there been any notable developments or shift in market conditions?
Not a huge shift. I guess obviously with the RBA decision, that was having an impact prior to the decision in terms of sentiment and confidence, and it's having an impact now that we've seen the reality of a rate cut. But Perth continues to be one of the most resilient and in-demand markets in the country. Over the past few weeks, we've seen continued upward pressure on prices, albeit at lower levels, which we expected this year. And the persistently low housing supply and the strong demand from owner-occupiers appears to be offsetting the slowdown that we've seen in the investor demand, which is slowing down, but albeit from very high levels, I might add. Vacancy rates here are still quite low in comparison to what we consider a balanced market, and that's driven rental prices even higher, according to REWA in their most recent statistics. And we're also seeing ongoing local and interstate investor interest here. Although we're advising clients with lower budgets to explore other markets, I don't have a lot of comfort with what investors can buy in Perth with a budget of around, say, 600, maybe even 650 now. And we're positioning those people into Melbourne and have been for the past few months. But there's still a lot of value in the Perth market above that point. But you have to be quite strategic about where you're putting your money now, I think.
The investors that we're talking to are local. We're helping people from Brisbane. Some of those investors aren't necessarily buying in Brisbane, so it's the other way around. But yeah, a lot of them are families looking to get a second place and wanting to do that now, thinking that things are going to get more expensive here and would like to lock something in at today's prices.
Yeah, so you mentioned these investors are doing the inverse. They're not investing necessarily, some of them in Brisbane. They're looking at other states. Which other areas are they looking to buy?
We found a couple of people buy in Townsville and Perth. Not really sure what the attraction is, but sometimes those people have got advice from buyer's agents. And I think you mentioned that on your podcast not long ago, that people were favouring the use of buyer's agents to give them advice on where to buy.
One of the things we've talked about was towards the end of last year. In fact, we focused quite a bit on bridging finance. Now, some people look at this as a real demon in the detail. They don't want bridging finance. They steer clear of it at all cost. What is happening in Brisbane with people engaging with bridging finance? Are you seeing much of that?
Yeah, exactly. There was a time when the fear was too great, and it's probably warranted. You do give up a little bit of power going under one of these arrangements, in that you are agreeing to sell your existing properties or to no matter what. Though at the moment we are seeing quite a bit of that bridging finance. Yeah, I suppose the reasons for that is just that it is people are not wanting to be out of the market. They're not wanting to sell and then start looking. There's probably a fear that they're out of the market for too long and things, keep increasing in value. Maybe just also the luxury of being able to move straight into the next place and, having no gap in between. I suppose, yeah, and tying into that first point that, they're not looking to hang on to that property anymore. So they're definitely looking to get rid of it. And just the cost to buy that next place is so significant that they're not able to hang on to both without going into one of these types of arrangements.
Yeah, because we had a couple of instances that we heard about, particularly around 2021 when the FOMO effect was in full play. And there were people that were doing bridging finance and they became a little bit unstuck because I guess the greed factor kind of kicked in because some of these people were looking at 4th, 5th and 6th properties. And then it gets really, really messy.
Yeah, correct. So the concern is as well that, you're not really sure how much to spend on the next place because you're not certain what you'll get for your place. You can pay $100,000 over for the place you're buying and then realise you have to sell for $100,000 less on your place, and it's a $200,000 turnaround on the mortgage. It can have a big impact. I suppose the people that we're doing this for, they're cautious in how much they're spending on the place they're buying. So in that sense, it works for them. They've got a good buffer in what they can sell for and still be in a comfortable position once everything's done.
You can join the conversation every week by using your phone. Record a message and then email us the file and we'll play any question or opinions you might have the next day.
So if you're living in a home that is not well insulated and not well shaded, but you do have an air conditioner, I would suggest before you switch on the air conditioner, you try a few passive ways of cooling down. Try to shade the windows from the outside so the sun doesn't even get into the home. And it may just be something very simple like a blanket on the outside. Sometimes these heat waves are just for 1 or 2 days. If you've got ceiling fans, use those first because they use very little energy, but that breeze that they create will actually cool you down. And only if you've exhausted all these passive means of cooling down, then switch on the air conditioner. If you do have a choice in selecting an air conditioner, use one that has got a very high star rating. Washing machines, for example, have star ratings for water and energy. Air conditioners have gone for air conditioning and cooling efficiency. Use the most efficient one because the more efficient the air conditioner is, the less you need to pay for the cooling.
What do you say about Australia's urban planning and not keeping up with pace when it comes to climate change? Because there's a real genuine argument around this, particularly with many new developments. They prioritise speed and affordability over sustainability, and that does and can lead to homes ill-equipped to handle extreme temperatures across Australia.
Urban planners are aware that that we need to become more resilient, and that includes heat waves. So if you look at new developments, they are planting trees, they are providing green spaces and nature strips. It just takes a while for those trees to really rise. When it comes to the site coverage, though, it's up to the home buyer or the new home builder to really then say, I want a big tree. Where can I have a big tree? Because that will provide shade.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.